Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming your way. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? I want to know how far this story has reached. No more waiting. Let's get into the video.
Casting shadows over Earth's moon, then shifting into low Earth orbit with precision engineered over 1,000 conquests. Their arrival was not a declaration of war, it was an execution order, delivered with silence and certainty. Below, Earth held its breath. Cities blinked under artificial constellations, strange stars that moved unnaturally across the night sky. On every continent, telescopes and satellite feeds relayed the same truth. The predators had come. Broadcasts from every major news network were drowned by the same emergency transmission, a voice, calm yet defiant, belonging to Commander Talon Reeves, Supreme Officer of the United Earth Defense Initiative. "This is not first contact," his voice declared. "This is the final mistake they'll ever make." For decades, Earth had listened to the stars, curious, dreaming of allies or saviors. What came instead was the sound of engines older than our civilizations, growling with unspoken threat. The Zarkonians weren't here to speak. They didn't offer peace or treaties. They hovered over major population centers like vultures circling a dying beast. On board the Vorgath Prime, the command vessel of the Zarkonian fleet, High Strategist Velkoth Ur watched Earth's surface with disdain. His second heart pulsed slowly in its casing as he turned his 6 eyes toward the planetary analysis interface. "Primitive," he said. "They still burn fuel to lift their machines. Let's take what we need and burn the rest." Yet something in Earth's silence unsettled him. There were no missiles launched, no panicked hails for peace, no immediate surrender. The humans, though surrounded, stood still. Velkoth Ur assumed fear, but fear makes noise. This was something else. Deep beneath the Norwegian ice shelf, inside the subterranean facility known only as Black Hollow, a single green light blinked alive. Beside it stood Major Aria Thorne, clad in the matte black exosuit of the Ghost Division. Her fingers hovered above the activation panel, eyes fixed on the holographic map of Earth, now marked with hundreds of red icons, alien ships. "Looks like the trap's sprung," she murmured, her breath fogging inside her helmet. "Let the hunt begin." The Ghost Division had been waiting, training, watching. For years, Earth had expected this invasion, and the silence above was not submission. It was positioning. Human operatives embedded within orbital junk fields, disguised as derelict satellites, began transmitting encrypted bursts. Cities powered down, not in fear, but in camouflage. Beneath every major metropolis, bunkers opened, not for civilians to hide, but for soldiers to rise. As the first Zarkonian dropships breached the atmosphere, streaking downward like fire-borne javelins, a network of Earth-based countermeasures activated. Not missiles, not lasers, but decoys, ghost signals, magnetic anomalies, plasma fakes. Above the Atlantic, the skies churned as dozens of Zarkonian ships began to experience system interference. Minor at first, then total. Engines failed, navigation crashed. One by one, their vessels stalled mid-air, and then they fell. The first exploded on impact, taking out its entire crew in a wave of black fire. The second was torn apart mid-descent by a silent weapon they couldn't track, something small, fast, and invisible to their sensors. On the surface, Aria smiled as the kill markers lit up on her HUD. "Welcome to Earth," she whispered. "Your hunt ends here." Above, Velkoth Ur stood rigid as multiple red icons on his tactical display blinked out, one after another. His command deck fell silent. "High Strategist," one of his subordinates stammered. "We're losing dropships. Something's wrong." No, not something. Someone. The sky had been torn open, but instead of a wounded world, the Zarkonians had found a sleeping beast that now bared its fangs. Humanity wasn't afraid. It was hunting. They had charted our planet, calculated our chemical makeup, dissected our weapons systems from captured satellites and probes. They called us primitive, a species bound by its own atmosphere, still crawling from its cradle like an infant learning to walk. To the Zarkonians, Earth was a target of opportunity. Rich in resources, disorganized, disunified. Easy. They didn't understand that humans don't fight clean wars. We fight desperate ones. High strategist Velkoth-Ur paced across the elevated bridge of the Vorgath Prime, his clawed feet clanging against the polished obsidian alloy. Every few seconds, another report flashed across the command interface. Dropship lost, communications jammed, sensor blackout, kill signals, ghost weapons. None of it made sense. "Their energy signatures are erratic," said one of his officers, voice trembling. "Our scanners can't maintain lock. It's like they're everywhere and nowhere." Velkoth-Ur snarled, mandibles twitching. "They are uncoordinated savages. Their technology is centuries behind. This is sabotage, internal failure. We did not travel 17 light-years to be insulted by electromagnetic tricks." But in his core, he felt it. They had underestimated something. Back on Earth, beneath a thunder-split sky, Major Aria Thorne advanced across the ash-black plains outside what used to be Houston. Her boots left no tracks, and her weapon, an XR-9 magnetic lance, hung silent on her back. She didn't need it yet. Not when the real weapon was what Earth had become. Around her, dozens of operatives in Ghost Division armor moved like shadows, unseen, undetectable, invisible to Zarkonian scanners. They weren't fighting back. They were executing a hunt. Above, another alien dropship spiraled out of control and burst into flame as its stabilizers failed. The product of a virus Aria had uploaded into the Zarkonian fleet hours before they even arrived. A virus hidden inside a centuries-old probe the aliens had captured and reverse-engineered. Earth had given it to them on purpose. "They thought we were weak," she muttered into her comms, watching the burning wreckage fall behind the skyline. "So we fed them their own hubris." In orbit, Velkoth-Ur received another transmission, this time video. It showed one of their own warships crashing into the Pacific Ocean, swallowed whole by a detonation they couldn't trace. The explosion was silent, sudden, and precise. No human craft detected near the site, a technician reported. "Sir, it came from within the ship." The high strategist froze. For the first time in his long campaign across the stars, he recognized the scent of fear in the room, not from the humans below, but from his own crew. Across Earth, the pattern repeated. Zarkonian forces landed in what they thought were unguarded cities, only to find them abandoned. Not in fear, but in design. The humans had hollowed out the infrastructure, turned entire blocks into traps. Buildings detonated from below. Artificial fog rolled across streets. Scrambling alien HUDs. Sewer systems delivered nanite swarms to melt exosuits from the inside out. They had trained for decades to defend their home, and now they were turning Earth into a weapon. Velkoth-Ur gritted his teeth. "Deploy sentinels. No more scouting. I want orbital bombardment on every major human structure. If they choose to fight like vermin, then we'll smoke them from their tunnels." But even then, the ground beneath Earth's soil began to shift. Something was moving. Something the Zarkonians hadn't detected. In Greenland, from a chamber sealed since the first Apollo mission, massive silos opened, not nuclear, not chemical. Quantum displacer cannons, reverse-engineered from stolen alien tech, calibrated in secrecy, powered by Earth's desperation and genius. They aimed not to destroy, but to erase. Velkoth-Ur stared at the blinking red alert on his console. Then another, and another. "Sir," his officer whispered. "The humans, they're not defending." Velkoth-Ur turned slowly. "Then what are they doing?" The officer looked up, eyes wide. "They're hunting." And somewhere in the smoke-choked ruins of New Shanghai, Major Aria Thorne raised her eyes to the sky, where the Zarkonian fleet hovered like a dying god. "You thought we were prey," she said coldly, her voice picked up by every transmission Earth still had. "But you never asked what happens when prey remembers how to kill." She raised her hand, and every orbital gun on Earth turned skyward. The night sky over Earth no longer belonged to the stars. What once sparkled with innocence, twinkling reminders of human dreams, now glowed with the unnatural shimmer of hundreds of alien vessels. But something had shifted. The air carried a different tension, not of fear, but of readiness. In hidden control rooms across the globe, silent eyes tracked every movement, every frequency, every thermal signature the Zarkonians produced. In an unmarked facility buried beneath the Mojave Desert, a single word echoed through the command chamber: Initiate. And with that, Operation Ghost Fang began. Above the Pacific, 3 Zarkonian carriers drifted in geostationary orbit, their hulls bristling with weapons meant to subjugate continents. Their scanners showed Earth as vulnerable, scattered, chaotic. But as they prepared to deploy another wave of extraction drones, something began to shimmer along their underbellies, barely visible flickers of motion. Then, darkness. A ripple tore through the void as if space itself blinked. The first carrier vanished from every sensor, its structure collapsing inwards in a silent implosion. No explosion, no energy spike, just deletion. High Strategist Velkoth Ur watched the replay in disbelief. Where is the debris? Where are the energy trails? None, Commander, replied the science officer. We don't understand. It's like the ship was pulled out of phase, out of reality itself. That was the first kill of Ghost Fang. But it would not be the last. The operatives had trained for this moment their entire lives. Earth's most elite warriors, enhanced with exo-reflex armor, cloaking tech derived from the very species now trying to conquer them, and weapons that had never been tested outside simulations, until now. They were scattered in orbital debris fields, embedded in lunar outposts, disguised as defunct satellites, even hidden in Earth's deep ocean trenches. The Zarkonians had scanned Earth's surface, but they had never scanned their own shadows. Major Aria Thorne led the ghost teams personally. Her voice was calm as she issued the next directive through the encoded global uplink. Fangs out. In synchronized perfection, ghost units boarded alien vessels mid-orbit using nano-adhesive tethers and ion silencer charges. Once inside, they moved like phantoms, bypassing detection arrays, mimicking Zarkonian biosignatures to avoid triggering alarms. One by one, systems were hijacked, navigation rerouted, shields inverted. Internal oxygen turned to anesthetic fog. Whole command crews collapsed in their own warships without firing a shot. Back on Earth, in the command center of the United Earth Defense Grid, Commander Talon Reeves monitored the operation. His fingers steepled under his chin, watching as crimson icons representing enemy ships flickered and vanished from the orbital map. 37 confirmed neutralizations, reported the AI system. Estimated enemy confusion index, 89%. Enemy response coordination, minimal. He allowed himself a grim smile. That's the difference. They invade like it's a game of chess. He leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. We play like it's personal. By the third hour of the operation, nearly 20% of the Zarkonian fleet had been either neutralized or rendered inoperable. But the real purpose of Ghost Fang wasn't to wipe them out. It was to break them, to fracture their confidence, to seed doubt, to shatter the illusion of dominance the Zarkonians relied upon like a drug. They had arrived with arrogance. They were now surrounded by shadows they couldn't trace, attacked by weapons that didn't exist on any of their strategic forecasts, undone by enemies that weren't even showing themselves. On board Vorgath Prime, Velkoth Ur's grip tightened on the command rail. The silence among his officers was no longer respectful. It was tense, afraid. We don't know what we're fighting, one of his generals admitted. We're not fighting, Velkoth Ur snapped. We're being dissected. He wasn't wrong, because somewhere in the ruins of what used to be New Sol, Aria Thorne stood atop a shattered alien dropship, her armor glinting under the firelit sky. Around her, teams extracted data cores, bioscans, fleet deployment information. Not just defeating the enemy, but studying them, learning, preparing for something bigger. The Earth had never intended to merely survive. It was collecting trophies. She opened a new uplink, transmitting directly to the Zarkonian fleet. This is Major Aria Thorne, United Earth Defense Command. We do not recognize your authority. You invaded thinking us prey. She paused, letting the silence hang. But predators don't ask for permission. They strike. And now we've tasted blood. Somewhere in orbit, another Zarkonian ship detonated, this time from the inside. Run, she whispered. But she already knew. They wouldn't make it. They came to Earth wearing the skin of gods, untouchable, omnipotent, indifferent. The Zarkonians had never known defeat. For over 4 centuries they'd torn through solar systems, cracked open planets like eggshells, enslaved species by the billions. To them, war was inevitability. Victory was protocol. Terror was tradition. But on Earth, something broke that pattern. Something ancient. Something human. On board the Vorgath Prime, the command bridge was unraveling. Dozens of officers barked overlapping reports in rising panic. Energy surges in the upper thermosphere. Sensor ghosts moving faster than light. Weapons offline without cause. Dozens of ships, once symbols of imperial pride, now burning, disabled, or worse, missing. And then, worse still, came the silence. No communication from the drop teams. No biometric data. No recovery requests. Nothing. Gone. "Sir," rasped a technician, her voice ragged, "we've lost contact with the entire southern hemisphere." Velkoth-Ur turned slowly, mandibles twitching. "Explain." She didn't have to. A single tactical screen lit up with footage from a forward recon drone, the last signal received before it vanished. It showed one of their planetary battalions disembarking near what used to be Johannesburg. The footage lasted 23 seconds. In it, armored Zarkonian infantry lined up in staggered formation, weapons at the ready. The ground was empty, silent, broken. Then the wind shifted. From the buildings, the alleyways, the shattered vehicles, humans emerged, but not as victims. The first wave moved like shadows, low, fast, efficient. Their armor didn't match. Their weapons were strange. Many had no helmets. Their faces were bare, not out of carelessness, but confidence. The second wave carried heavy weapon systems mounted on exoskeletal frames. They moved with purpose, no formation, no protocol, just instinct and precision. The third wave didn't shoot at all. They hacked the enemy's own weapons, turning their rifles red-hot until they exploded in the user's hands. By the end of the 23 seconds, every Zarkonian was down. No survivors, no retreat, only one human, standing amid the wreckage, staring directly at the drone. She raised her hand in a simple, unmistakable gesture. "Come closer." Then the feed died. Velkoth-Ur's body shook, not with fear, but with something he couldn't name. A primal unease, the kind that predators feel when they hear the growl of something more ancient behind them. "Pull back the fleet," he ordered finally. "We regroup, reinforce. This planet is not what it appears to be." But the stars themselves were no longer safe. Beyond Jupiter's orbit, a ship drifted. The Sentinel, a human deep space stealth vessel. It had been following the Zarkonian fleet since before they even entered the system. On board, Commander Jace Harlan watched the fleet's chaos unfold. He tapped the comms. "Mission control. Ghost Fang phase the third complete. Predator protocol has begun. Targets are now reactive. Pattern analysis confirms full psychological destabilization." A voice answered. Calm, cold, human. "Proceed with hunting operations." Jace smiled faintly, eyes gleaming behind his visor. "With pleasure." He gave the order. Within minutes, human hunter-killer satellites, long dormant, long forgotten by Earth's own people, awakened in low orbit. They fired nothing. Instead, they transmitted a signal, a frequency calibrated not to destroy, but to deceive. The Zarkonian ships began turning on each other. AI systems malfunctioned, weapons misfired, identity beacons confused friend and foe. The great war fleet of the Zarkonian Empire began to eat itself. On Earth, in the shadows of a ruined city, Aria Thorne watched the light show in the sky. Ships burning, collisions, explosions blooming in the atmosphere like reverse stars. A message crackled into her comms. "Major Thorne, this is Admiral Dorian. Your phase is complete. Confirm status." She spoke quietly, evenly. "Phase confirmed. The hunter is blind. The weapon is exposed. Earth is no longer prey, sir." There was a long pause on the line. "Understood," said the Admiral. "Proceed with counter-invasion protocols. Make them feel it." Aria raised her eyes to the black heavens above. Oh, they'll feel it. For the first time since the war began, the Zarkonians realized the truth. They weren't the apex predator. Not anymore. In the void of space, the hunted had turned. The trap had closed. The hunter was now the meat. And humanity. Humanity had finally remembered what it meant to be feared. The stars looked different now. Where once they had offered hope, distant and glittering promises of unity, knowledge, peace, they now stood as cold witnesses to carnage. Great arcs of flame rippled across the upper atmosphere as Zarkonian vessels spiraled out of orbit, disemboweled by weapons they didn't believe Earth could ever possess. What was once a display of imperial dominance had become a graveyard in motion, and the predators who brought war had begun to understand the true nature of their prey. Earth had changed. No longer a backwater planet on the edge of the galactic map. No longer a curiosity of warlike bipeds with outdated machines and chaotic governments. Earth had become something else entirely, a pack of ghosts. From the orbital ruins of Station Virex 3, drifting lifeless above the Indian Ocean, a lone Zarkonian scout pilot named Zarek floated in what remained of his reconnaissance pod. The cockpit was cracked, filled with static. His HUD was shattered, his leg broken, his 3 lungs spasming with pain. Yet he lived. What he saw horrified him more than the wounds. The Earth below pulsed, not with fire, but with silence. Not a single Earth-based warship rose to meet the fleet. No satellite beacons pleaded for mercy. No distress signals echoed into the void. The world was quiet, watching, and when he activated his distress beacon, only one message came through. A human voice, female, cold, "We see you." Then static. Somewhere far below, in the jungles of what used to be the Amazon basin, a former Zarkonian extraction team attempted to regroup after losing contact with their command vessel. Their advanced armor gleamed with artificial scales and kinetic barriers, built to survive solar flares and void-born beasts. It didn't help them here. They moved in silence, 8 of them, stalking through overgrowth they could barely process with their scanners. Earth's biosignatures were too complex, its ecosystem too irrational. Then they began to disappear, one by one. No sound, no warning. One moment there was movement in the tree line, then nothing but leaves rustling in the wind. By the time only one remained, panic had replaced discipline. He activated his personal shield, triggering an area burn, reducing trees and ground cover in a radius of 20 meters to ash. But the moment the smoke cleared, he saw them. 3 humans, unarmored, covered in dirt and blood, faces painted black, silent. Their eyes glowed faintly under the reflection of moonlight filtered through dense clouds, and they smiled. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Across every continent, stories emerged. Zarkonian units routed not by heavy resistance, but by precision. Guerrilla strikes so efficient, so brutal, that they left no trace of the attacker. Whole platoons went dark without firing a shot. Vessels fell from orbit after being infected with code no alien system could read. It was as if Earth had bred killers for this very moment, and in a way, it had, because for years, humanity had trained in secret, not to invade, not to conquer, but to understand its own limits. Ghost Division, Night Guard, the Arc-Light protocols. Programs so black even Earth's governments barely knew they existed. Soldiers trained not just to kill, but to haunt. In the underground ruins of London, Aria Thorne crouched beside a data terminal, fingers dancing across a cracked keyboard. The power grid flickered. Behind her, dozens of survivors and operatives moved in coordinated silence, redirecting captured enemy drones, hacking deep into Zarkonian command networks, and deploying new frequencies to confuse the orbital fleet. She spoke quietly into her uplink. "Command, this is Thorne. Confirming Zarkonian response protocols have broken down. Chain of command disrupted. Morale compromised. Recommend immediate escalation." The response came instantly. "Escalate. Send the signal." She reached into her suit and pressed the transmitter lodged beneath her armor. A subspace burst echoed across Earth's orbit. It carried one sentence: "Let loose the Earthborn." And across the planet, hidden bunkers opened. Not just soldiers, not just weapons, but people forged from trauma, raised in darkness, children of disaster and fire, the secret armies of Earth, born not of conquest, but of necessity, warriors trained in silence, hunters who knew no flags, no mercy, and no surrender. The Earthborn, they rose from under the ice in Antarctica, from the acid ruins of old Chernobyl, from deep sea vaults in the Mariana Trench, from caves so ancient they predated civilization. They moved with one purpose: end the invasion. No medals, no headlines, no prayers, only action. And as they moved across the world, silent, surgical, unrelenting, the Zarkonians began to transmit distress signals, not for reinforcements, but for evacuation. Above it all, drifting silently in the void, the human space station Erebus 9 watched. No lights, no signal, just a hollow tomb repurposed into a control relay. Inside, Commander Jace Harlan adjusted the satellite arrays. His voice was barely above a whisper. "They thought they would hear us scream." He paused, watching another Zarkonian vessel erupt into fragments as it tried to flee the atmosphere. "But all they'll hear is our howl." And Earth howled silently, with fire, with fury, with vengeance. The sky cracked. It began as a whisper, a shimmer in the upper atmosphere, almost too faint to notice. But then came the resonance, deep, thunderous, and artificial. Across every continent, people looked up. The clouds had changed. They shimmered with metallic hues, like mercury flowing in reverse. Then the first drops fell, but they weren't water. They were pods, thousands of them. From high-orbit canisters hidden for decades among civilian satellites and abandoned space debris, the steel rain was unleashed, humanity's secret arsenal. Each pod contained only one thing: a single elite soldier clad in Skyfall armor, a suit so advanced it was illegal even on Earth, camouflage skin, neurological targeting interface, grav boots that let them land without sound, even from orbit, tactical war gods disguised as falling stars. They hit the ground like judgment. In the smoldering ruins of the Balkans, where a Zarkonian siege engine had reduced cities to rubble, 5 pods landed in tight formation within the enemy's command zone. Before alarms could sound, the entire sector went dark. Seconds later, the siege engine erupted in blue flame from its core reactor. No one saw the humans leave, only the ash remained. In orbit, Velkoth-Ur watched as unit after unit vanished from his warboard, not defeated, not damaged, erased. Each red icon blinked out with no pattern, no warning, no explanation. He turned to his officer, face trembling. "Do we know what weapons they're using?" "No, High Strategist," the officer choked. "We don't even know how they're moving so fast. Their ships don't register. Their weapons are silent. It's like they're ghosts." Velkoth-Ur finished, his voice barely audible. They had thought themselves monsters, but monsters feel no fear, and now, every Zarkonian on the surface was afraid. From the ruins of Tokyo to the scarred jungles of the Congo, steel rain units advanced without mercy. They moved through buildings like whispers. They took out command nodes, fuel supplies, shield generators, and extraction beacons. Their weapons made no noise, only flash. Some used magnetic blades, slicing through armor as if it were cloth. Others wielded shock carbines that liquefied internal organs without leaving external wounds. They left no prisoners, because Earth had learned from its wars, Vietnam, Fallujah, Ukraine, Mars. Centuries of asymmetric warfare had taught humanity that survival required more than strength. It required brutality married to intellect. And now Earth had both. Major Aria Thorne stood atop a broken monument in what used to be Paris, now a smoldering crater of steel and ash. The Eiffel Tower lay collapsed in the distance, half melted by plasma fire. Around her, dozens of steel rain operatives cleaned the zone, scanning for the final traces of enemy movement. Her armor was scratched, her visor cracked, but her stance was unshaken. She activated her uplink. "Command, this is Thorne. Zone 22 neutralized. Objective complete." "Understood," came the reply. "Proceed to priority Omega. High-value target confirmed. Vorgath Prime is in range." Aria turned her head toward the sky. The Zarkonian flagship still hovered in low orbit, a wounded Leviathan bleeding heat and smoke into the stratosphere. She narrowed her eyes. Time to bring the storm home. On board Vorgath Prime, Velkoth-Ur stared into the void. His hands trembled. His armor felt too heavy. The flagship, once the pride of the Empire, was bleeding internally. Hallways full of wounded. Fires in the secondary bay. Comms reduced to static. There were reports, impossible ones, of humans inside the ship. "How did they breach orbit?" one of his officers whispered. "We had planetary shields. We had the advantage." No one answered, because there was no answer that made sense. Until the screen blinked. A transmission. It was her, Aria Thorne. No backdrop, no insignia, just her face, and she was smiling. "High strategist," she said softly, like a teacher scolding a student. "You came here expecting fear, submission, screams." She leaned closer to the camera. "What you got was the rain." Then the feed cut, and the first hull breach alert sounded. Velkoth-Ur turned. The lights flickered. The deck shook. Outside the observation window, hundreds of falling lights descended from orbit, each one carrying a human, each one silent, each one death. The steel rain had reached him. He stepped back as the hull groaned. "No," he whispered, but the door behind him exploded inward. Aria Thorne stepped through the smoke, a magnetic blade in one hand, and a pulse grenade in the other. "Hey, Velkoth," she said, voice calm as stars. "Time to meet the humans you pissed off." And then, the room filled with steel. The mighty fled. The Zarkonian Empire, whose very name once silenced empires, now trembled. Their flagship, the Vorgath Prime, bled from a dozen wounds, its hull shredded, internal systems corrupted, fire pouring from every deck. Within its burning core, high strategist Velkoth-Ur limped through smoke-filled corridors, one arm torn from its socket, blood dripping from the edges of his carapace. He no longer walked as a conqueror. He ran. Behind him, human operatives stormed the command tiers, not in waves but in whispers, one at a time, each one bringing more precision, more fury, more purpose. The walls echoed not with the chants of victors, but the thud of boots, the crack of suppressed rifles, and the sound of Zarkonian command systems shutting down. Velkoth-Ur turned a corner, his breath ragged, only to freeze in place. Before him, a holographic screen flickered, an emergency broadcast from across the fleet. He watched in silence. Dozens of his warships were retreating, without orders. The captains, each handpicked over decades, were screaming for evacuation. "Our weapons do nothing," one cried, his mandibles shattered. "They're inside the ships before we can react." Another pleaded, "They kill without heat signatures. Our AI can't track them. There are no battlefields. There is only death." In every quadrant of Earth's orbit, Zarkonian warships began breaking formation, firing thrusters to escape Earth's gravity well. Some collided in their desperation. Others dumped cargo to gain speed. Discipline, once the pride of the Empire, had been replaced by instinct, survival, and even that was uncertain, because Earth was not letting them go. From the hidden lunar base Kronos Edge, long thought abandoned after the failed Mars terraforming projects, a battalion of Ravager-class kinetic disruptors activated, mass drivers capable of launching solid metal rods the size of buildings at orbital velocities. No explosions, no lasers, just tungsten falling at 13 kilometers per second. A Zarkonian cruiser attempting to slingshot past the moon disappeared in a flash of light and a ring of debris. The metal spear had hit it dead center, splitting the vessel like a ripe fruit. On board the ground control station, Commander Jace Harlan stood over the weapon interface, his face blank as target after target turned red, then gray. "Make sure they understand," he said to the technician. "They don't leave without remembering who owns this system." Another impact. Another ship gone. Back on Vorgath Prime, Velkoth-Ur stumbled into the secondary launch bay, only to find it in ruins. Dropships shattered. Fuel cells ignited. The bodies of his own officers littered the floor like broken toys. Above it all, standing amid flame and shrapnel, was Aria Thorne. Her armor was cracked, blood smeared across her cheek, eyes glowing behind her shattered visor. "You're running," she said, as if she were still in a briefing room. Velkoth-Ur snarled, "You don't understand what you've done. We are the Zarkonian Empire. You will face retribution that—" "No," she cut in. "You're not an empire anymore." She stepped closer, boots crunching over twisted metal. "You're a story we'll tell our children about the day the hunters came and forgot to check if the prey had evolved." He charged, a final act of desperation, claws bared, one last scream echoing across the ruined bay. She didn't move, she just raised her blade. And when it was done, the high strategist of the Zarkonian Empire lay motionless in a pool of dark, thick blood, the light in his eyes flickering, then fading. Above Earth, the retreat turned into a rout. Zarkonian vessels disabled themselves to avoid capture. Others self-destructed, choosing death over humiliation. Of the 312 ships that entered the system, less than 30 remained intact, and none of them dared to fire another shot. In the skies over Earth, the once mighty fleet became wreckage, a drifting constellation of twisted steel and haunted memories. Earth's sky was theirs again. Aria stood at the edge of the launch bay, staring through the broken bulkhead at the burning heavens. A voice crackled in her comms. "Major Thorne, this is command. All remaining enemy ships are exiting orbit. Do we pursue?" She closed her eyes. "No," she said. "Let them run. Let them tell the others." Pause. Let them warn them. The sky no longer burned. It smoldered, and in that smoke, the galaxy would soon find a truth. Humanity does not kneel. We rise, we adapt, and when the gods come for us, we make them bleed. The war was over. At least, that's what the broken remnants of the Zarkonian fleet believed as they limped across the stars, hulls bleeding sparks and dignity in equal measure. Their survivors spoke in hushed tones aboard silent vessels, their voices haunted, their command logs corrupted, their pride shattered. But the galaxy had only just begun to listen. Every species with eyes on Earth had watched the broadcast silence, the unexpected descent of the steel rain, the blinding pulses of planetary railguns, and then the void. A void not of weakness or devastation, but of precision. A void filled not with the screams of the conquered, but with the absence of conquerors. They vanished, without spectacle, without resistance, without mercy. On the diplomatic moon station of Varnexus, where the Galactic Council convened for millennia in polished marble halls beneath domed stars, whispers slithered like vapor between species. The Zarkonians were unbeatable, and Earth beat them in a week. How? No declaration, no ultimatum. Just erasure. The Council had previously voted, unanimously, to classify Earth as a Tier 7 labor resource. Primitive, strong, obedient. Now, those same ambassadors couldn't meet each other's eyes. At the edge of the assembly floor, Observer Tel Varan, one of the few non-human xenoanthropologists who had warned the Council, stood with his arms crossed, his many eyes blinking in dismay. "I told you," he whispered to no one in particular. "You can provoke 100 species, but never provoke one that's been preparing for the apocalypse since its own birth." The humans had inherited a planet forged in violence, floods, plagues, nuclear standoffs, climate collapse, civil wars, extinction events. They were tempered by fire not once, but constantly. And now, they'd brought that fire to the stars. The council chamber erupted in argument, species bickering, demanding answers, contingency plans, new classifications, threat containment protocols. But it was too late, because Earth had already sent a message. In every system that had watched the fall of the Zarkonian fleet, a repeating signal began to arrive via tight beam transmission. The signal was human, simple, unencrypted, deliberate. It contained no voice, no threat, no demand, just a single rotating image, the Zarkonian High Command, dead in orbit, and stamped over it, in white English lettering, "This is your only warning." On board the orbital research vessel Athena 9, drifting at the edge of Earth's influence, Admiral Dorian stood before the transmission hub. His hands were folded behind his back, his posture straight. A younger officer approached, pale with awe. "Sir, is this really how we're going to greet the galaxy? With fear?" Dorian turned slowly. "No," he said. "We greet them with truth. They wanted to hunt us, use us, turn Earth into a mine, or a pit, or a petting zoo." He stepped closer to the viewport, watching the Earth rotate slowly beneath the stars, still scarred, still healing. "They wanted monsters," he whispered. "So we showed them ours." Back on the planet's surface, in the rebuilt ruins of what was once Berlin, Aria Thorne walked through a garden of scorched glass and reborn steel. The memorial was simple. A sculpture of a predator's skull, Zarkonian, split clean down the middle, resting on a human soldier's helmet. No names, no ranks, just an inscription at the base, in dozens of galactic dialects. "We are not what you think." She crouched beside it, fingers tracing the edge of the blade scar that had split the alien skull in half. Behind her, children played in the dust. Some wore repurposed helmets too large for them, giggling as they mimicked the warriors of Earthborn legend. Others pointed to the sky, where decommissioned orbital drop pods now served as playground towers. Aria watched them in silence. She thought of the dead, the cost, the pain, and the question that came next. What would they do with this power? Humanity had risen, but now, the galaxy knew their name not with reverence, but with caution, and caution breeds paranoia. She activated her wrist comm. "Jace, you online?" Commander Harlan's voice responded instantly. "Always. You heard the council?" "Yep." Whispers on every channel. Some are scared, some are angry, most are quiet. "Good," she said. "Let them be." "And the ones that aren't?" he asked. She stood, eyes locked on the stars. "Then we remind them why the ashes whisper our name. Because Earth was no longer prey." It was a legend growing louder with every star that blinked. The stars do not forgive arrogance. They remember. They echo. And now, they carried the scent of burnt alloy and Zarkonian blood, drifting silently across the void, a spectral trail of a fallen empire. The galaxy had watched Earth burn, but it hadn't ended in fire. It had ended in silence. And silence, for a species like humanity, was never emptiness. It was intention. In the deep reaches of the Sol system, where even light moved slow and the cold carved through hulls like razors, remnants of the Zarkonian fleet tried to hide. They drifted in formation near Saturn's rings, cloaked, silent, wounded. 3 capital ships and a handful of escorts, all that remained of a once glorious dominion. They thought they were safe there. They were wrong. Commander Jace Harlan sat within the cockpit of the Wraithborn, a classified vessel never acknowledged by any human government. It shimmered as it moved, cloaked not by tech alone, but by understanding, of radar, of heat, of pattern, of expectation. His fingers hovered over the command console as his team monitored the final phase of a mission codenamed Ashfall. "Targets acquired," said his tactical officer. "Thermal reads confirm biosignatures. No internal defenses online. Looks like they're still bleeding from the last encounter." Jace exhaled slowly, his voice ablaze in the dark. "They came here to feed on us," he said. "They tore into our homes, vaporized cities, enslaved minds, all because we weren't tall enough, fast enough, alien enough." He glanced out the viewport at the looming shape of the Zarkonian dreadnought ahead, hulking, dead-eyed, massive. "But we were arrogant too," he admitted. "We thought the stars would wait for us to be ready." The silence in the cockpit deepened. "Turns out," he said, tapping a final command, "they didn't need to." In a heartbeat, Ashfall activated. Beneath the outer crust of Saturn's moon Enceladus, automated relay bunkers, built over 30 years before and long thought defunct, powered up. From the icy cracks in the moon's surface, 6 drone spears launched into space, each carrying a payload so dense it folded local gravity around it like paper. The Zarkonian ships never saw them coming. One blink, and then rupture. A dreadnought split in 2, its core exposed to the vacuum before it exploded, illuminating Saturn's rings in purple fire. Another began to rotate violently as its internal AI turned against itself, its navigation overridden by Earth code injected through quantum infiltration weeks before the war had even started. In less than 2 minutes, every Zarkonian ship had been neutralized. No fanfare, no communication, just consequence. Because Earth had made a decision. No more mercy for monsters in royal armor. In the aftermath, Aria Thorne stood before a council recording terminal on Erebus 9, her message already transmitted across 42 known systems. Her speech was short, measured, deadly. "You judged us by our past," she said. "By the wars we fought, the divisions, the chaos. You saw a fractured species, but failed to see the one thing that unites all of us." She leaned closer, her eyes not angry, but cold. "We remember pain." And across the galaxy, the message spread. Screens replayed the fall of Zarkonian ships, the screams of their high strategist, the expressionless precision of Earth's retaliation, and the symbol burned into their command consoles, the white insignia of a fang pierced by lightning, the mark of Earthborn justice. In the far reaches of the Arcan Void, aboard a listening station monitoring Earth's broadcasts. A reptilian alien analyst turned to his superior. "They killed them all," he whispered. "Every last one." The superior, gray-scaled and ancient, shook his head. "No," he said. "They taught them that arrogance demands blood, and that humans will always collect the price." Back on Earth, in the underground war archives of Geneva, Commander Dorian closed the final case file on the Zarkonian campaign. A holographic placard appeared. "Blood price paid." He turned to his officers. "Prepare the deep treaty protocols." A young analyst blinked. "But sir, who's left to sign?" Dorian's face didn't flinch. "They'll come," he said. "They'll come because they know now. Earth won't be enslaved. It won't be hunted." He walked into the shadows of the vault, his voice echoing behind him. It charges interest, and in every system where Earth's name had once been laughed at, now it was spoken quietly, carefully, with a new weight. The weight of a predator no longer pretending. The galaxy once viewed Earth as a speck, a fragile world, green and blue and trembling in its obscurity, spinning alone in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. It had no ancient fleets, no interstellar colonies, no great biological enhancements or crystalline mines. But now, that same galaxy stared into the void Earth had carved into the stars, and saw not a victim, but an apex predator rising from its slumber. In the black reaches of the Centaur expanse, an old mining outpost received a signal, not coded, not encrypted, just 2 words burned into plasma script across every screen. "We remember." The station evacuated before the end of the cycle. In the diplomatic chambers of the Karath Dominion, once allies of the Zarkonians, delegates argued in panic, their voices shrill, their limbs twitching in defensive instinct. "If we retaliate, we die," one ambassador hissed. "If we ignore them, we become prey." The room went silent, because now Earth had become a new center of gravity, not a star, not a throne, but a warning. From beneath the surface of Mars, where Earth's first ghost colonies had been built in secrecy, massive hangars roared to life. Human fleets, no longer just defensive, were being prepared. Ships not designed to protect Earth, but to hunt beyond it. Recon, infiltration, extraction, execution. Programs once built to counter hypothetical invasions were now being redesigned to prevent them altogether. By striking first, in a steel chamber buried beneath the Himalayas, Aria Thorne stood before a new generation of soldiers, not conscripts, not volunteers, chosen, tempered, ready. They stood in rows, clad in midnight armor with no flags, no unit names, no call signs, just a single sigil on their chests, a human eye over a shattered fang. She stepped forward, her voice unwavering. "We were prey. We survived. We endured. But now..." She looked over the soldiers, men and women, enhanced and unenhanced, flesh and steel. "Now we hunt." Behind her, a massive blast door opened to reveal a ship unlike any before it. The Vindicator-class dreadhunter, the first of its kind, forged in orbit from salvaged Zarkonian wreckage. Silent, fast, and lethal. The galaxy would not see it coming, because Earth had studied its enemies, not just their weapons, but their fears. In orbit above, Erebus 9 transitioned from a control station to a command citadel. New fleets docked, new weapons tested. Trade signals were monitored, not for commerce, but for patterns of weakness. For too long, Earth had looked outward in hope. Now it looked outward with intention. Admiral Dorian stood at the edge of the observation deck, watching hundreds of drop pods load into new carriers. "You think they're ready?" asked Commander Jace Harlan beside him. Dorian didn't answer right away. He turned, looking through the viewport at the distant stars. "They're not ready for us," he said, "because they still think we're human the way they defined it. Fragile, divided, reactive." He turned to Jace, his voice low and final. "But we've redefined ourselves. We are no longer the prey species, no longer the anomaly, no longer the laughingstock of the stars." He pointed toward the dark. "We are the Reapers, and the age of human predators has begun. Far from Earth, in systems where Earth's name had never been uttered before, that name now came with a shadow. Convoys rerouted to avoid Saul's influence. Trade federations changed policies overnight. Species once curious of Earth now locked their borders, not because Earth had threatened them, but because it hadn't needed to. The silence of the Zarkonians told the story loud enough, and on the broken hull of a drifting alien ship, long since abandoned, someone had etched a human phrase into the metal with a torch. A phrase not of poetry, but of truth. We came from prey, but we learned to bite back. The stars would never forget, and neither would humanity. Because the galaxy was vast, but Earth had teeth now, and it was hungry.